high school football season may be coming to a close, but WBFO's Friday Night Lights is continuing on the hardwood. Starting next Friday, WNY Athletics and WBFO are coming together to bring you the high school basketball games this winter. This is Francis Beck of WNY Athletics. We're here to get you ready for a brand new season of high school hoops with the Friday Night Lights preseason basketball special from girls to boys, Monsignor Martin, everything in Section 6. We'll tell you about the biggest stars and best teams during this next hour on WBFO. We want to remind you that support for Friday Night Lights preseason basketball special comes from our members and from Miracle Method Surface Refinishers in Western New York and Rochester, and by Zolad's Executive Transportation. Once again, I'm Francis Beck from WNY Athletics. We're going to spend the first half hour talking about girls basketball, and then before getting into the boys in the second half hour. And I'm joined right now by Tim Lindler, who has been following girls high school basketball locally for about a decade. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Francis.
So, Tim, for the first time in about a decade, the Cardinal O'Hara Lady Hawks are not the defending Monsignor Martin champion. The question is, Tim, will they reclaim that crown this year?
Well, that's certainly their main goal. Clearly coming out of a season where they started a little up and down last year. They were fairly young for their as things go. A lot of underclassmen, a lot of new pieces they were intertwining last year. But at the end of the season, they started to play their best basketball. But then again in that very very tight MMA championship game last year, did fall to Nichols in a one possession game. But they do return the vast majority of their production from a season ago. Their entire starting five is back, highlighted by, really got contributions from up their entire starting five, but led by Kyla Hayes, returning two-time All-Western New Yorker, still just a junior. She's really a tremendous all-around player who's really been building her game year after year. Started at Maryvale as a middle schooler, and is just turned into one of the area's best with O'Hara the last few seasons. That's far from the lone talent at O'Hara currently. She's joined returning senior Jordan Williams, who's just committed to Niagara. Really strong defensive player. One of the best on-ball defenders in Western New York. Also returning is Olivia Russell, another recent commit. She just committed to Division II DeUval down the another local commit at the scholarship level. And also the Day sisters are also back. Sophomore Annabelle Day, who really had a breakout season last year as a freshman after coming over from NT, and also Brittany Day, who's another very good athlete and just really rounds out their starting five. Really no weak points up and down that starting five, to say the least. And the main sort of knock on O'Hara last year was really the lack of a bench. They had some issues with numbers at times. Had to bring a good amount of JV players up midway through the season, but that should not be a problem this year, as they're welcoming in a pair of transfers as well. Naima Blair, who was a starter on Depew's sectional winning team last year, and also Taryn Ashley coming over from Amherst, another promising young player. So they should definitely be able to go a solid 7 or 8 deep this year, which should give them some good, relief on the starting five, which they didn't really have last year. To maybe put them back over the top potentially in the MMA.
And of course, Nichols returns. But they lose their key player Quinn Benchley, but they bring back Bree Barboudet. Yeah,
correct. Nichols, getting over that hump last year to bring home the MMA title, really had a tremendous season. Was able to sweep O'Hara 3 times, and just suffered only a few local losses, one league loss, and a couple out of area losses. But they do return Bree Barboudet, one of the top rebounders in the state, a great post presence. Herself a recent commit to the University of Buffalo, UB, and she's going to have to probably shoulder more of a scoring load this year. Nichols was a very balanced team last year, like you said, with Quinn Benchley and Phelan Griffin, among others. And Both of those players have gone on to college, but along with Bree, they also do return fellow starter Lily Colpoys, and also their sort of sixth player from last year, Evelyn Walcott, another long, tall post player. So they certainly shouldn't have any issues in the paint. She's one of the top post tandems probably in Section 6, but certainly they will face some questions in the backcourt. Who's going to take over the point guard duties and the the scoring from the backcourt. So certainly still a very, very strong squad, but some questions heading into the season, up against the likes of O'Hara and St. Mary's and others.
Tim, before we move on to Section 6, I want you to make a quick note, because I was reading your preseason stuff, and you're pretty high in St. Mary's right now. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about O'Hara returning just about all the production from a year ago, and the same can be said for St. Mary's. They were probably even a younger squad than O'Hara was last year, and they're, of course, led by the returning star Emily McDonald, now just a sophomore, gaining a ton of interest at the scholarship level already. She was, St. Mary's leader in many statistical categories: points, assists, rebounds. Just had a tremendous breakthrough season, again, for such a young player. And she's also joined by, numerous returners, including Jada Mushat, another tremendous on-ball defender, right up there with Jordan Williams as one of the best in Western New York. Also Macy Kovac, a very strong three-point shooting specialist from the wing. They did suffer a few transfers out, mainly their post players from last season, so they will be very guard heavy coming to the season. But also returning a pair of seniors who both kind of missed some time due to injury last year, that being Kiera Klein and Kenzie Owens. So both have a ton of experience at the varsity level. So if those players can stay healthy, they can certainly be X factors and play a big role for St. Mary's this coming season.
Let's move on to Section 6. So a little bit of a change this year. Section 6 now goes to 6 classes. They add a class AAA. So for those of you who don't know, they usually have 5 classes, AA to D, and it's all based on school size. So they added AAA to add another division for the larger schools. This makes more sense, unfortunately, for the downstate schools rather than the upstates. But that's a whole conversation for another day. But AAA is going to be Lancaster, Niagara Falls. Lancaster defending AA champions. They returned Madison Francis, who's probably one of the better prospects to come out of Western New York, or at least she's really shown a ton of talent in her first couple years. But Lancaster loses some key pieces from last year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any talk about returning talent from Western New York really has to start with Madison Francis. I mean, everybody who follows, girls and women's basketball, knows what she can do. Just a tremendous all-around talent. Still just a junior, so a few more years to get out and watch her play at the high school level. But yeah, like you said, Francis, I mean, Lancaster does lose just about everyone else that made a major contribution last year. Rachel Komrowski, Brooke Bauer, Casey Mahoney, among others. Now a number of them playing at the college level as well. And it's going to be a question of who can provide any secondary, tertiary scoring around Madison Francis. It's tough to double team her and triple team her, but that's likely what she's going to be facing the majority of the season. And it's yes, she does have the ability to find an open player, but it's who's going to have the confidence to knock down those shots. They did have I believe an undefeated JV season last year, Lancaster. So it's likely going to come down to a numerous amounts of JV players coming up and having that confidence to sort of carry over some of the success they had at the JV level and bring it up to play with such a talent like Madison. I'm sure there'll be some bumps in the road early on, getting used to that higher level of competition. But I would suspect, come later in the season, sectional time, they'll still be a force in the area. And like you said, obviously there's only two local teams in AAA, so it'll be Lancaster and Niagara Falls in the final no matter what. So, sort of a double-edged sword there. You don't have to go through, a tough.
But you don't have but you're off for basically 2 weeks while everyone else is playing in the sectional round.
Yeah, so you can't really, I guess you could maybe schedule a couple scrimmages maybe. I don't know, not sure officially how that all works when the playoffs get started, but there's at least, like you said, at least a good almost 2 weeks there, if not more of lack of competition after a tough 20-game slate packed into a 2-3 months.
So let's move on to Double A. As we mentioned, Lancaster moves up, so Double A a bit wide open, and we see some new teams who are traditionally in A move up. Give me a couple teams out of Double A who you're feeling strongly about.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I would say the first team I would mention that's coming up from A in the Double A, looking to make an impact, would be Star Point. They have been building for the last couple of years. They return numerous starters. I believe at least 4 out of 5 starters return. Megan Millville, their post player, Ava Anastasi, Sofia Wozlewski, among others. So they have a very strong core returning, well-balanced team. They play well as a team. They played together for, like I said, 2-3 years now at the varsity level. Have had, building on some success. They fell last year, I believe, to Hamburg in a decently competitive game at Buff State. But now looking to take the next step in a very crowded Double A. There's 16 teams in Double A. Just running through the teams the past couple weeks, I would say there's at least 10 that could make a legitimate claim, to go all the way and win a section title. A couple other teams that would stand out. Clarence have had some great success in recent seasons. They're led by the returning senior Ella Corey, one of the top pure scorers in Western New York, a great athlete all around. Lost a couple other pieces. They do return a few other guards that should help buoy the scoring off of Corey's shoulders. Some of the other traditional Double A teams. Orchard Park was a very young team last year, led by Haley Senfield. She returns along with a couple other starters. That should be a very competitive team in the always competitive ECIC 1. Then you can move on to a few NFL teams. Kenmore West has numerous returners, led by Sophie Balsano. Lockport returns Azriel Hall, among others. So, I could talk about Double A really for 20, 30 minutes here and not potentially hit everybody that might be a contender, but that's certainly a division to watch. There's going to be not even just quarterfinals, but pre-quarterfinals in Double A that might be worthy of a semi and final in other years. So, just a very deep class, and it'd be a really fun year in Class Double A for sure.
Move down to Class A. Hamburg, who was the winner last year, moves up to Double A. You still have Williamsville South, who loses, who won the A2 and lost in that crossover final to Hamburg. Obviously, right now the biggest with 26 teams. Williamsville South defending A2 champs, but they lose a key piece in Gretchen Dolan. How do you see A playing out?
Yeah, I mean, you when you lose a player like Gretchen Dolan, who provided such talent and leadership, and not just scoring but leading the team in almost all statistical categories over the past couple of years, and a player of that caliber, you're never going to really replace that. You just gotta, everybody else that's returning just sort of has to step up a little bit. But the cupboard's far from bare at Williamsville South. One of if not the most consistent program really over the past decade or so in Western New York, with their ability to reload. And they do have numerous returners, I would say, led by Kimora Berry. She was sort of the second option most nights last year to Gretchen, but she had a very strong summer and looking to improve on her statistics last year and take on more of a leadership role for Will South for sure. She's started to receive some scholarship offers herself. So they do have a number of other returnees who are each going to have to step up in their own right. But they also gained a couple transfers themselves. Nicole Miller came over from Amherst. So they certainly have depth. South will probably be able to play 8-9 players fairly comfortably. But again, it's just who's going to take on that role to step up as a leader. If they want to have the similar success as previous seasons, it's probably going to have to be more of a collective effort than having one player, once in a generation type of talent like Gretchen Dolan, not going to walk back through the door this season. So, but certainly have a lot of talent returning, and will probably be the favorite on paper in A1 at least at this point. You also have Amherst, lost a couple players to graduation, lost a couple transfers out, but they still should be very competitive. Probably the biggest threat, in my opinion, to Will South in A1. Of course, they know each other very well, played many times. And then moving down to A2, a team that comes up from B. Well, a few teams that have come up from B that were in B last year. Depew and Newport, who played in the last two Class B1 championship games, they both move up to Class A. Both suffered some pretty significant losses their own right. Kaylee Kristoff and Depew, Sophie Auer from Newport last year, two of the best players in the area over the past few seasons, have gone on to college. But Newport returns Liza Whitehead, among others. Depew returns softball standout Mia Vanelli, who really had a tremendous breakout season on the basketball court last year. So both of those teams should be competitive in the A2. But really, the A2 conversation, in my opinion, starts with Iroquois, who returns 4 of 5 starters. Molly Meskel, their most impactful player from a year ago. They dealt with some significant injuries. 3 of their top 4 players really last year missed major time with injuries. But if they're healthy and back, they really had the most well-rounded team to start the season. So certainly should be a major player in Iroquois as well.
And Iroquois gave Hamburg a game, I think, in their first meeting earlier in the season. I think the second meeting was a little more Hamburg in favor, but I think the first one came down to like the final possession.
Yeah, I mean, there were some tremendous games last year. Iroquois certainly have the scoring talent. They can, on any given night, they have 3 or 4 different players who can put 20 plus on the board. So certainly, if they can put it all together, they may be one of, if not the most, dangerous team in Class A this season for sure.
All right, let's move on to Class B, where you mentioned Depew. They were the winners last year of that. They defeated Southwestern in the crossover, but again, they move up to A. So is this Southwestern's class to lose?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at every team, sort of shuffling up a little bit. Everything sort of got pushed up this year. So Southwestern, traditionally one of the smaller teams in Class B, now they're going to be in what looks like B1 instead of B2. They're certainly have the most returning talent of a returning Class B team, led by Reese Beaver, who just committed to Damon recently, a few weeks ago. One of the best scoring guards in all of Western New York. I believe averaging well over 20 points a game. They're also returning a few other players. Her sister Brea Beaver returns, along with Maddie McIntyre, among others. So certainly a lot of experience on Southwestern, looking to get over the hump after they, been in the mix for many years, but looking to make their first trip to regionals this year. Assuming, I'm sure that's a big goal on the Southwestern bulletin board. But it's not going to be an easy trip through B. A couple teams, speaking of sort of pushing teams up class by class. Wilson, who has traditionally been a Class B team, went down to Class C last year, made it all the way to the finals, gave Randolph, the eventual state finalist, all they could handle in the sectional final down at JCC. But Wilson's back in Class B this year. They return a number of players. Ryan Fieri, obviously coached by and Coach Brian Baker, is going to have his team, ready to dig in, defend, and so they're probably on paper the Class B2 or B2 favorite. So potential for a Southwestern Wilson crossover would be.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
This is a good time to mention that our first game, which is going to be next Friday here on WBFO, is going to be Oakfield, Alabama at Wilson, 7 o'clock. And I believe that's part of their yearly tip-off tournament, right, Tim?
Potentially, yeah. I'm not sure if they're holding a full tournament.
Okay. I know they usually hold one.
So with the early start with the Roger Weiss Invitational, which is being held, possibly after this airs, or before this airs rather. It's the 25th of November, a very early start down in Jamestown. Some good matchups, including Wilson is actually playing in that invitational. So that will be the game versus Oakville, Alabama will be their second game, I believe. But Oakville is a traditional Section 5 powerhouse as well, so that should be a great matchup.
All right. On that note, you mentioned Randolph's. We'll move to Class C. They're the defending champion. Let me pull up my notes here. In that one, they made it to the state finals, coming up just short in that one. So is Randolph the favorite, or is somebody new going to kind of give them a little more than they expect?
Well, I would certainly say that Randolph is the favorite, returning Class C finalist. They made a tremendous run to the state finals, 3 straight thrillers, as I mentioned, against Wilson in the sectional final. They eked out a very close victory over Pavilion in the regional, and then defeated Union Springs in a great contest in the state semis before falling to really Class C powerhouse Millbrook, who's won, I believe, 4 out of the last 5 or 3 out of the last 4 Class C state titles. But Randolph returns 3 of their top 4 contributors from last year. Peyton Morrison, now a junior. Skylar Harrington, just a freshman, already getting some very strong Division I interest. And Quinn Pence, the younger sister of last year's point guard.
The Kyra Pence?
Kyra Pence, yeah. Now at Cobleskill. But, all 3 of them were major contributors last season. They're all back, have played together for, a couple of years, all strong, have had strong summers on the AU circuit as well. So certainly Randolph a favorite, and I'm sure they have a goal on their side to, even take it a step further and potentially, not just get back to states, but potentially, try to bring home a title, of course. But there's a few other, certainly at least a few other strong teams in Class C that can give them a potential run. That led by Frewsburg. I got to mention Frewsburg. They were the Class C representative 2 seasons ago. The first season that where the state tournament returned, they made it to regionals and lost a close one to East Rochester. But they have a very young squad last year, led by Tegan Troitsky, Jaden Troitsky. Ava Jimerson is now back from an injury. She's a tremendous soccer player. She had another great soccer season for the Bears, who won another sectional soccer title. But so they can really fill it up from beyond the arc. A very guard-heavy team. Not much of a no real post presence, but again, Randolph, very guard-heavy team themselves. So that could be, and I believe they will meet at least twice during the regular season, and then potential for another meeting in a sectional matchup down the road. So very very guard-heavy, 3-point. Focus a lot on the 3-point shots for each team. So that could be a very fun match, very high-scoring matchup. Has the potential to be a high-scoring matchup, in my opinion. So those would be the 2 teams that I would see as the Class C headliners at this point.
Panama made it to the state semifinals last year in Class D. Is it that pretty much their class to lose once again?
Well, it's a little tough to say in Class D. Of course, Mandy Brink was the standout for Panama last season. She's now moved on to Brockport, so losing your leader really of the past number of seasons, going to be a tough one to replace. They do return a couple players, Kylie Horton, among others, but did lose a couple of starters besides Mandy Brink. So going to be a tough adjustment probably for Panama. Going to have to find somebody else who can shoulder that load of the point guard duties. But of course, Panama made it to states last year. The year before that, Sherman made it all the way to the state final. Sort of when you talk about Class D in numerous sports, it's Sherman, it's Panama, and the third team usually Clymer. So
where have we heard that before?
Yeah. So Clymer may be the slight favorite on paper. They returned the top player in Class D in Alexis Neckers. She had a tremendous campaign last year. Actually also played on the WNY team over the summer, so we got some good experience playing with some of the top players in the area. So she'll lead Clymer's effort to try and win their first sectional title since 2012, I believe. After they were a previous very strong Class D team back in the 90s and 2000s. But so Clymer probably has the best overall player, but who will step up for them, to surround Alexis Neckers? That's a big question. But in Class D, the smaller schools, sometimes one or two top players can get you over the hump. So,
Tim, before we wrap up, I remember last year looking over the schedule. It seemed like every 2 weeks there was like a big ticket matchup. It was either Nichols versus South. You had Dolan versus Strack. Headline players facing each other, going on to play the next level. A lot of those players have graduated. When you look at the schedule, obviously you mentioned a couple games which are happening before the show, some which are happening just as the show begins. Is there a couple maybe private public matchups or matchups between two headliners that you're really looking? You have your game, you have that circled.
Yeah, this year for sure. Almost every year you can say this, but this year for sure, the pair of O'Hara-St. Mary's matchups, those are the standout matchups on the MMA side for sure, in my opinion. Of course, being league matchups, those will happen. I believe one in January, one in February, at the very end of the season. Talking about sort of MMA versus Section 6, I know that Randolph is playing a very tough schedule. They're playing O'Hara, they're playing St. Mary's twice, they're playing Nichols twice. So really testing themselves as a smaller school. Lancaster is also playing Nichols again, so two of the very best players in the area going head-to-head with Madison Francis and Bree Barboudet. So those will be tremendous matchups. Would have to look at the specific calendar there, but if you go and look at any of the schedules.
Section 6 basketball.com, and then
site is fully operational.
And then the Monsignor Martin one. Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. We graduated a lot of good players: Clara Strack, Gretchen Dolan. We know about Madison Francis. I want you to give me one player who we don't know about, which is going to be in a similar conversation of those players by the end of the year.
Just one. It is a tough spot. You may not necessarily not know of this player, but I would say I would look for a real breakout campaign from Skylar Harrington from Randolph, a team who again has state title aspirations, so maybe playing deep into the season. Just a freshman this year, but I would expect big things from her down in the southern tier.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Talk about girls basketball. We're going to talk about the boys next. But we want to remind you that support for the Friday Night Lights preseason basketball special comes from our members and from Miracle Method Service Refinishers in Western New York and Rochester, and by Zolad's Executive Transportation. We'll be right back on the Friday Night Lights preseason basketball special.
What does it mean when people say America is a land of opportunity?
It means the power to discover.
To redefine yourself.
To improve yourself.
To challenge yourself.
To realize there's more in you
than you ever knew
that you could do.
It means giving people an open field to explore what they do best.
With the best tools.
The best training.
The best technology in the world.
We bring out the best in the people who serve.
So you can be all you can be.